Have you been to an art museum lately or plan on going to one in the future? If you have been to an art museum, especially bigger ones, haven't you noticed that you have to limit your time in order to get through the entire museum? My goal is to persuade you to focus your time and energy on looking at paintings over sculpture. Not only am I a painter myself, but I study art history, it's my minor. So I've looked at numerous paintings and other forms of art as well. Nearly everybody's gone to an art museum at least once in their life, and you'll definitely go to one if you plan to travel or even study abroad. And this argument about painting being superior to sculpture and other mediums is relevant to how you spend your time when you're in these museums. The three major advantages that painting has over sculpture is one, its use of color, two, its use of perspective, and three, it's the number of figures that a painting can portray. And these are the basic arguments of the Paragone debate, which dates back to the Renaissance and was summarized by Samuel Kress of the National Gallery of Art. Now that we know the three basic advantages that painting has over sculpture, let's look at its use of color. A painter's manipulation of color is its strongest advantage over sculpture. Color can provide a painting with a sense of realism and naturalism, which goes a long way for portraits and landscapes, the most common yet maybe the most powerful form of art. An example would be Rembrandt, who is a Dutch painter, and his portraits are considered masterpieces, and he wouldn't have been able to do this without the manipulation of color. And another example is Gustave Courbet, a French painter, whose landscape paintings would not have been able to be the way they are without the manipulation of color. Another thing that color can do is provide the viewer with a sense of emotion, and you can see this when you look at Georgia O'Keeffe's naturalist landscape paintings that use bright colors in order to evoke certain emotions for the viewer. And a great source to look at all these paintings is ArtStore, which is an online art database with thousands of images. So now that we've considered color, let's look at painting's use of perspective. Painting's use of perspective gives it another advantage over sculpture, and it does this by allowing the viewer to get more involved in the scene. And the use of perspective also broadens the horizons of the artist, allowing him or her to create more possibilities for conveying a story, something that a sculpture can't necessarily do. And because your time is so valuable and limited, you will have more of an experience from the art museum if you focus on painting over sculpture, and the use of perspective within painting helps you become more involved. In a less obvious example that painting is better than sculpture is the number of figures that a painting can display, which can also provide the viewer with more of an experience. And this is something that painters can do with ease, but sculptors have trouble with. According to Samuel Kress and the National Gallery of Art, even Michelangelo struggled with painting 3 or more figures. And a perfect example of comparing a painting to a sculpture is when you look at Michelangelo's sculpture of David and Peter Paul Rubens' painting of David slaying Goliath. And it's because of Peter Paul Rubens' inclusion of Goliath and the other figures in the background, that's the army, that makes the painting, or that gives the painting more, it tells a better story of David than Michelangelo's sculpture does. And considering the arguments that I provided you with, instead of rushing through the art museum just for the sake of seeing every work, you should instead focus your time and energy on paintings. I've talked about the use of color, perspective, and number of figures, all factors that play into the advantages that painting has over sculpture. And if these points weren't enough to persuade you, just know that according to the Paragone, Leonardo da Vinci himself preferred painting over sculpture.